Good morning, Johnny Reb Gamers. Today we're going to cover turn sequence number 7, perform normal movement. In the rulebook, it's covered on page 51 and 52. And remember, in the movement phase, we are going to move the units that are marked movement or formation change. Now, one thing to remember right away is that when you move during movement phase or change formation, you lose a dice if you wind up firing at the end of your movement. That's an important thing to remember. And also remember that any unit on hold can fire before the moving unit can fire. So for instance, on this Union regiment on the left, this Confederate regiment is moving. The hold unit will be able to fire as the unit moves closer, and the hold unit's firing will automatically put casualties on the moving unit before the moving unit gets fired. And the same with formation change. If a unit is formation changing and a unit marked holds, can shoot at any point during the movement phase or formation change. So for instance, if a unit was firing at this unit in formation change, they would want to shoot at it before they're formed, because when they shoot at it while it's still in disorder, it's a +3 die roll modifier. Also, if a unit is marked hold or first fire, and a unit comes within close range, which is 2 inches, the first fire unit or the hold can fire again if they already fired with 1 less die. So again, if they move within 2 inches close range, the hold unit and first fire unit would be able to fire first before moving fire. So that's important. Now, as far as movement, as we see on the chart here, it's a beautiful chart that shows whatever formation you're in, how far you get to move in inches, the maximum number of inches. So if you're in single line, you get to go 6 inches in the open, up to 4 in broken, 2 in woods, 1 in rough. Now, on a personal note for me, I play it, if it's light woods, that it's broken terrain. And if it's heavy woods, the woods chart. But that's the way I play it. Also, if you want to move your troops a little farther, if you go down to the bonus movement, in this situation, we're not going to use the dice, but you can go an additional 3 inches for road, 3 inches for open, 2 inches for broken, 1 inch for wood, and ½ inch for rough. So use the bonus movement if you want to push the movement a little farther in whatever formation you're in. What you have to do, however, is roll 1 die and beat its tactical competence roll. Roll 1 die above its BMP. In this case, if that's a 3, they'd have to roll above it in order to remain in order. If they do not pass the tactical competence roll of 1 die, that unit would end its movement in disorder. Now again, this is covered on page 51 and 52 in the rulebook. I just want to point out a few things about movement. Moving through units. Formed units can move through skirmishers with no penalty. Likewise, skirmishers can move through formed units with no penalty. If formed or disorder infantry units move through each other, each involved unit must take a tactical competence roll, which is rolling 1 die, and if the unit rolls higher than its BMP, it does not go into disorder. If it fails, the unit does go into disorder. Officer present does help with the -1 BMP. So both units, if they go through, the other unit has to check to see whether they fall into disorder. If artillery moves through a deployed infantry line, there is no disorder roll. But if the artillery cavalry dashes up a road through an infantry march column, the involved infantry must roll for disorder. this with the tactical competence roll of 1 die. Any move that would cause an entire non-skirmishing unit to move more than 45 degrees off its front is considered a disruptive move and causes that unit to make the entire move in disorder as at the disordered movement rate. Now, one of the aspects of Johnny Reb is the wheel move. Any wheeling movement must be done at the beginning or the end of the turn, not in the middle, and the move is measured along the arc. So, for instance, if this unit wanted to wheel, they would simply leave one of the end stands in place. Of course, it could pivot, and then you would measure the distance from where it was to where it wound up being. So in this case, for instance, this wheel move would be approximately a 4-inch move, and then you could continue on in the direction you wanted to go with the rest of the move. So for instance, in line, you would go normally 6 inches. You just wheeled 4, so you'd have 2 left. In this case, if it was over the fence, you would subtract 1. Any movement over fences is a -1 on movement. Now in column, reversing the movement, you do not simply turn the stands around. You have to measure what it would cost to curl around like that and head that direction, which would probably be about 2 inches. So remember, you don't turn the stands around in march column. You have to measure the arc of the turn of reversing the column. We've already covered push move or quick march, which is on the bottom of that chart under bonus movement. Again, you do not use the dice. You just use the number in front of the dice marker there. A couple quick notes regarding moving. Again, if you move and then choose the fire, you're going to be a -1 die. So in this situation, they're a normal movement, 4 inches. So if that unit moved an inch, they'd be 3 inches away. You would roll 2 dice only instead of 3, because normal range you usually get 3 dice, but for movement you get 1. If you moved in the close range, you would subtract a die for moving, but then add a die for close range. However, again, in this situation, the whole unit would get the fire at the moving unit. Now, one of the interesting aspects and fun aspects of Johnny Reb is when a unit is in column, and we call the movement a front to flank movement. To do a front to flank movement, or from column to line or line to column, it's a -2 on the movement. So in this instance, and it's one that is used a lot by Johnny Reb to move quickly into place, remember that a unit in column can snake any direction. In this situation, it could curve this way and move as many inches in the open as the chart says. For instance, in this instance, the march column can go 14 inches. So this unit could go 14 inches and then wind up subtracting 2 inches, so it could go 12 inches for subtracting 2 inches and wind up in line. And vice versa. If you're in line and choose to go into column, you would simply subtract 2 inches. So just remember that from going from march column to line, you subtract 2 inches, or from line to column, you subtract 2 inches, and then complete your movement. Now let's talk about formation change. Formation change is very simple. Whatever formation you're in, you can form into any position, into any formation, that you want. And this FM, it costs, if you're a veteran or elite unit, it would cost half a movement to form into whatever formation you want. And then you could still move half the distance of the movement of the formation you're in. If you're green or skirmishers, it costs the whole turn to reform. The whole turn to reform. So let's remember that. Also, one thing I just made a mistake in, if the unit is disordered, or green or skirmishers, it takes a whole turn to reform. So in this situation, they wouldn't be able to move. However, if you had been in, let's say, extended line, you choose to go into line, you could still move half distance after forming. Now, one thing I want to point out regarding in the woods, again, I play it that woods, light woods is broken terrain and heavy woods is woods on the chart here. Some people may play it different. That's fine. You play it the way you want. One thing I will point out as far as moving fires, and the next video I'll get into actually going through the firing process in more detail. But one thing to notice here, when you're in the woods and you want to fire at one another, you have to roll above the distance between the two units, and both units have to roll. So for instance, in this scenario, they're 4 inches apart, and so each unit would have to roll a 4 or better to see each other. So let's roll for the Confederates, for example. They rolled a 5, so they would see them, so they would shoot normally. Let's see the Union, they rolled a 1. So normal distance is 4 for normal distance for shooting. Because they couldn't see them, they would lose a die roll. It would be considered area fire. So remember, in the woods, for sighting to shoot at one another and for seeing one another, you have to measure the distance between the two. In this instance, it's 4. The unit rolled a 1, so instead of rolling with 3 dice, they're going to roll with 2 dice because it's area fire. The Confederates were able to see the Union, and they could roll with all 3 dice for normal distance, except for the fact in this situation they moved, so they would lose a dice. So I think that pretty much covers it for turn sequence number 7. Perform normal movement. In turn sequence 8, coming up next, we'll resolve moving fires, and I'll give you several examples. Again, on page 34, it describes the move marker and the formation change marker, FM. And then on pages 51 and 52 in the rule book, we have normal movement and the other aspects of moving through units, disruptive movements, wheeling movement, reversing movements, and push, move, quick march. So we're almost there, getting through the rules. We have a couple more turn sequences to go, and then I'll get into other things like cavalry and get more detailed into firing and modifiers for target and fire modifiers. Have a good day. See you in the next video.